This video will show you how to complete an assembly of your reverse engineering project. Now, on my assembly that I'm demonstrating up here, I already have all the different pieces that I want. For you, when you're just starting off, you're going to be using the Place tool. This will give you a folder of all the different parts that you have, and you'll select the parts that you need to add them in to your assembly. One thing I would recommend to make your assembling a lot easier is a tool called Ground. Whatever piece in your mind is kind of the base or the biggest piece that's not going to be moving very much, that's what you want to call your grounded piece. It's really easy to ground something. You just right click on it and then you select Grounded. What this does is it locks that piece into place. For example, you'll see I've already done a little bit of assembling here, but I'm clicking and dragging and I'm not able to move this at all. In comparison, some of these pieces, when I click and drag, they move around. This is something that has not been assembled yet. After you have your starting piece grounded, you can start connecting pieces. In order to connect pieces, we want to use the Constrain menu. There are three main types of constraints that we're going to be using. One is called Mate, one is called Flush, and then the last one is called Insert. We're going to start with Mate. Mate makes two surfaces touch. For example, right now, exit out of this for a second so I can move some stuff around for you. Notice that this piece I can pretty much drag all over the place. The goal is for this piece to sit kind of on top of there, like that. So what I ultimately want is I want the bottom of this piece, this gray one, to be touching the top of my light gray one. So I'm going to use the Mate tool, because Mate makes those two faces touch. So I select Constraint. I already have Mate selected, and then I just click on the two surfaces that I want to touch. So I want this face to sit on top of this one. Notice how it slides it down. I hit apply to save that, but it's clearly not in the correct place yet. If you look at that, you'll notice I can still slide it side to side. If I change my view to the side, I'll notice that this place, it is now sitting in a better spot, but there's still too much movement. So my next step would be to slide it over so it's actually where I want it to be. So for this case, I'm going to use something called Flush. Flush is when you align two sides so that they're next to each other. In this case, I want this side to be even with the blue side. So I'm going to use Constrain, but to use Flush, I just click on this piece over here, and then again you click on your sides. So I want this face to face the same direction as this one in a line. I hit apply to save it, and now as you can see, I'm a little bit more centered. From here I can still slide it forward and backwards, which I don't want, so I'm going to just apply a second Mate constraint so that this edge, make it a better angle here so I can see it a little more clearly. We want this edge to touch this one. Oh, and I got an error there. So occasionally if a constraint won't work, you'll get an error message. If that's the case, exit out and do cancel, and that'll undo that constraint. Okay. So I chose one that probably wasn't quite right, or I was going to get some sort of conflict. I will come back to that one later. You're going to find with the assembly process, you're going to do a lot of testing and moving and undoing, and that is totally fine and totally normal. Sometimes when you're trying to constrain, you have errors like that. It could be that your parts are sized wrong as well. So if something like this is I'm using some part that somebody else made, they had the wrong dimension, it might not constrain perfectly. I do want to show you the final tool you will use called Insert. Insert is great when you have some sort of object, like in this case a screw, that you need to place into a hole. Again, it's under the Constrain menu. This time though, it's a different tab. And for Insert, you select which part of in this case the screw, I want to go into the hole. So let's say I wanted to put this portion of the screw, and I wanted it to go and touch the top part of this hole, and it just slides it into place. Hit apply to save it. Notice now we're locked in. The ultimate goal is that you make your assembly so that it looks as realistic and moves as realistically as possible. You'll notice that I do want to be able to move this back and forth. It moves a little bit further than I want. I do need to go back in and add some additional constraints here, but you can get the basics. So your job is to figure out how you can use mate, flush, and insert to try and assemble your reverse engineering project.